It's been said, if you have ever really suffered, if you have ever known heartache or loneliness or pain, if you have ever been crushed with remorse over sins committed and longed never to sin again, if you have ever come to realize that this world will never satisfy the deepest longings of your heart, then heaven ought to be one of the most wonderful words in the human vocabulary. You know, the Bible has a lot to say about hell, but it doesn't have a whole lot to say about heaven. But in this video, we're going to explore everything that the Bible does say about heaven as I take you on a virtual tour of what God has in store for us throughout all eternity coming up. Okay, so the first thing that we need to understand about heaven as well as hell is that both of these are actually temporary holding places, and neither of them represent our final destination. Let's take hell, for example. Hell is simply a word that refers to the place where you go when you die apart from Christ, right? So hell is where people are now, but that's not where they're going to live throughout all eternity, because the Bible says that one day all of hell and Hades are going to be thrown into their final destination, which is the lake of fire. It says that in Revelation chapter 20, verse 14. Then death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire. This lake of fire is the second death. So I want you to think about hell right now as simply like a jail. And people are going to be there until they are sentenced for their crime, at which time they will be transferred to their final destination, which is the lake of fire, which we'll see as more like a prison. Well, heaven is the similar way, my friend, right? Heaven is where you go now whenever you die, having a relationship with Christ. But the Bible describes that God has something even much more beautiful in store for us. It's called the new heavens and the new earth. Let's read about it. It says here in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 5, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, 'Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever.' And the one sitting on the throne said, 'Look, I am making everything new.' And then he said to me, 'Write this down, for what I tell you is trustworthy and true.'" Woo! Man, my brothers and sisters, I am getting so excited as I begin to try to wrap my mind around this beautiful new heaven and this new earth that God has in store for us. So you see, where you and I are going to spend eternity is going to be in the new heaven and new earth. And John has this beautiful vision where he sees this beautiful city. We'll call it the capital city of heaven and the capital city of this new heaven and new earth. It's called the New Jerusalem, as it is coming down from heaven, making its way onto this earth that we are going to spend eternity with Christ. And we're going to explore 7. Why not 7? Because 7 is the number of perfection. It's the number of completion all throughout the book of Revelation. We're going to explore 7 very important features of this new Jerusalem. First, let's take a look at the dimensions. The Bible describes this city, this new Jerusalem, to be laid out kind of like a square, or better yet, a cube. Notice it says this. It says, "When he measured it, he found it was a square as wide as it was long. In fact, its length and width and height were each 1,400 miles. In other words, this beautiful New Jerusalem is going to be as wide as it is long, as it is high, about 1,400 miles. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, that would be about the same distance from the Atlantic Ocean on the east side of the United States all the way westward to about the Rocky Mountains. It's going to be the most beautiful high rise that you've ever laid your eyes on, with believers occupying apartments in every single tier. And so before we go into this beautiful New Jerusalem, let's focus our attention on the beauty of the exterior of the New Jerusalem. First, we're going to take a look at the walls. Notice John says here, "Then he measured the walls and found them to be 216 feet thick, according to the human standard used by the angel." Those are some very, very thick walls, especially when you consider what these walls are going to be made with. The next verse says this, "The wall was made of jasper." Oh, my brothers and sisters, can't you just imagine this beautiful red stone that God is going to use to create these 216 feet thick walls that are going to surround the city of the New Jerusalem? But it goes on to say this about these walls. The wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were written the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So I want you to imagine this now. Think of a cube, right? Or think of the bottom of this cube city as a square. And I want you to think about 12 stones, foundational stones that surround this city. And each one of these stones has the name of one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. But it gets even more beautiful whenever you now look at what these 12 foundational stones were actually made with. Let's keep reading. It says here, "The wall of the city was built on foundation stones inlaid with 12 precious stones. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst." Now, upon doing further research, each one of these foundational stones will radiate a different color of the rainbow, which will reflect the beauty and the glory of God. Oh, my saints, we're still on the outside of the city and we haven't even made our way in. Now that we've looked at the dimensions and now that we've looked at these walls, let's take a look at the gates that are going to be on these walls. You see, each wall is going to have 3 gates, totaling 12 gates in all. Let's read about it. It says here, "The city wall was broad and wide with 12 gates guarded by 12 angels, and the names of the 12 tribes of Israel were written on the gates." Hey, why not? Because if you have the names of the 12 apostles on the 12 foundational stones, that represents the New Testament. But now you have these 12 names of the 12 tribes of Israel written on the 12 gates that are on the 4 walls, which represent the Old Covenant. So you have representation of the Old Covenant, the saints in the Old Testament, as well as the church, the saints in the New Testament, coming together to create God's beautiful eternal family. But it gets even more beautiful because it says this, "The 12 gates were made of pearls, each gate from a single pearl." See, God is going to outdo himself. God is going to create something so beautiful for you and I. He has something so amazing in store that you and I have never even laid our eyes on, because each one of these gates is created with one single pearl. All right, are you ready to go inside of the city? Let's go inside. So as we go inside of this city, the first thing that we notice is that the city is of pure gold. Can you imagine an entire city that is made out of pure gold? That's what the new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem is going to look like. It says here, "And the city was pure gold, as clear as glass." And then John goes on to describe the street that is in this city, which is also made of pure gold. It says here, "The 12 gates were made of pearls, each gate from a single pearl, and the main street was pure gold, as clear as glass. Now look, you and I have never even seen gold that looks like this, because when we look at gold, we don't see anything clear. But whatever material this is, this gold is going to be so beautiful that it's going to be so translucent that it is as clear as glass. Now John, as he is having this vision where God is showing him what this new Jerusalem is going to look like, he also sees a river in this city. Let's read about it. Then the angel showed me a river with the water of life, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. It flowed down the center of the main street. My friends, if you love to drink water like me, you have never drank any water that has been so pure, because all the water that we've drunk before has been contaminated, it's been polluted, it's been filled with chemicals to try to cleanse it. No, we're going to have access to drink the water that as it has been intended. It's going to be pure. It's going to be uncontaminated. It's going to be unpolluted, because it is going to be flowing from the very throne of God and the Lamb. But next we see that there is going to be a tree that is going to bear 12 fruits, one fruit for every month. But it's not like we're going to be counting time, because we're going to be existing in all eternity. But this is symbolic of the beautiful sustenance that will be available to us in heaven throughout all eternity. Let's read about it. It flowed down the center of the main street. On each side of the river grew a tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, with a fresh crop each month. The leaves were used for medicine to heal the nations. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. But hey, if you have ever tasted fruit, if you ever tasted kiwi, if you've ever tasted mangoes, if you've ever tasted strawberries and apples and oranges, oh, my friends, you have never tasted anything the way it was intended to be tasted. But now we come to this phrase that has perplexed many people, where it says that we're going to eat, or there'll be leaves available for the healing of the nations. Now, what in the world does that mean? Because earlier we saw that we are going to be living with God throughout all eternity, where there'll be no pain, no more death, no more tears, no more sorrow. The old things have passed away. And so therefore, what in the world will we need healing for? Well, Pastor John MacArthur gives us a little bit of insight as to what this word means that will help us unlock the mystery and the meaning of this text. He says, at first glance, that seems confusing, since obviously there will be no illness or injury in heaven that would require healing. Therapia, or healing, is the Greek word, however, does not imply illness. Perhaps a better way to translate it would be life-giving, health-giving, or therapeutic, from which we get our word. The leaves of the tree can be likened to supernatural vitamins, since vitamins are taken not to treat illness, but to promote general health. Life in heaven will be fully energized, rich, and exciting. But then the seventh and final thing that we'll notice about this new Jerusalem is that there will be light, but not the light that you and I are used to seeing that comes from the sun and the moon. There will be no need for sun and moon, because God himself will provide the light. Let's read about it. And the city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city, and the Lamb is its light. You see, John describes this place called the New Jerusalem, the new heaven and the new earth, as a place where there will be no night. In other words, our bodies will not have the normal need to go to sleep, because we're going to have these perfect glorified bodies like Jesus that never sleeps nor slumbers. In other words, you and I are going to pull an all-nighter for eternity. Now, as we bring this video to a close, I want to encourage you to consider one thing. Throughout the book of Revelation, John is using symbolic language to try to describe as best he can what he is seeing in this vision. However, we may not know everything about heaven, but what we do know is that if heaven is a place where God is going to dwell, we know it's going to be a very, very beautiful place. And over again in Scripture, we are called to set our minds not on the things below, but to set our minds on the things above. And my friend, if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, If I don't ever meet you on this side of heaven on earth, I hope one day to meet you on the other side in heaven. Grace and peace, fam.